all to another level. Talking about this
Yes, we can to manage money.
What the great resignation is showing is that people are no longer willing to put up.
Yes.
Today, I am so thrilled to have in this episode Kristin Bell. And Kristin is a global diversity, equity, and inclusion executive on a mission, actually, to creating access to opportunity for the systemically excluded, underserved, underestimate. I love that, just that. So, hi, Kristin. Welcome to the Meaningful Wealth, Meaningful Life podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And I know that was a lot of descriptors to add in, but I wanted to make sure I covered the basis of who I'm trying to serve. So thank you for saying all of those.
That is important. I've noticed that all of them have their own importance. That's why I also just spell them out. So tell us, for those who don't know you, tell us in your own words who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I think the one word to start off this brief description of who I am and what I do is I am a disruptor. And by disruptor, I mean that I am someone who comes into a space that is following status quo, that does not benefit the identities of those who are historically excluded or who are underrepresented, underestimated, and underserved, to create and deploy systemic solutions that serve those populations to create equity and equality in this place that we call the world. So, but outside of that, I am a global diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner. I am also an HR people leader by trade as well. And I wear multiple hats. One of them is I'm an associate director for a Fortune 500 company in the DEI space, but I'm also a two-time co-founder, one for Culture Site, which is the only platform that's been created for employees to really navigate discrimination, retaliation, or harassment in the workplace. And then the other is Review Taylor, which is a performance management software platform that creates equitable performance reviews in seconds. And so what you should know about me, at least from that brief introduction, is that there is equity and inclusion and diversity and employee advocacy embedded into the fabrics of everything that I do. And so I am very privileged and what I consider to be very blessed to be a person that gets to be and do the same work in my personal life as I do in my professional life. And it's all one big pot together.
Wow, that is awesome. And do you find some time to sleep after doing all of those things?
At some point, sleep is in there, but I do try to prioritize self-care as well. Yes. And I think that, to do the work that I'm doing would be impossible without self-care, because you have to be able to pour from a place of overflow in this type of work.
Yeah, it's important to say that, although you have all those multiple hubs, you're a disruptor, you have multi-entrepreneur on 2 platforms, and you have your corporate job, you have everything else going on, but at the same time, you are taking care also to yourself, because this is one of the topics that we've all been hearing recently about burnout and, trying to, do everything at the same time. So you're going to share a bit of your tips later, how you do everything. For some people who want to do quite a lot of things, how you may be managing your time. Some tips perhaps you're going to tell us in a moment. So thank you for these things. So, and now, I know that you share quite a lot, but is there one thing that most people don't know about you?
I think maybe the thing that most people don't know about me is that I am an ambivert. And I wanted to call that piece out because, sometimes I have to embed myself in different communities where I'm going out to proactively meet people, to understand what their needs are, to find a way to connect them with different resources. But I also get my strength from, taking the time to reflect and to take care of myself. And so if someone is hearing for the first time that I'm doing all of these things, their brain is like, okay, when does this girl sleep? When does she eat? All of those things. But because I practice a high level of self-care, it enables me to be able to go out and to do the things and to be able to connect with people. And so I think that most people are surprised by that. They would think that I'm an extrovert. I am actually an ambivert. So I'm right there in the middle.
The middle.
That's super important to me that people know that about me too.
Yeah, that is interesting. Exactly. So you are bilingual actually. You can speak both language. You can speak the introvert language, you can speak the extrovert language when you can adapt to extrovert. That's a very good place to be actually. And actually I think that I met a lot of successful people who are kind of right ambivert actually, as you say. Actually, they are able to switch. They are like big public speaker, and some people just think that they're extrovert, but actually real deep down they may be much more towards introvert side. So but they know how to play both game. So that's a very good skills actually, or very good talent or nature to have. So tell us, what is your background before you came to HR and all these equity, inclusion realm? Where did you come from? Have you always been, gravitating towards HR, equity, and everything else like this?
This is hilarious. So I'll give you a little bit of background info of when I was a kid and then what I got to in college. So I knew that in the 6th grade that I wanted to be a doctor and an attorney, where we used to have this schedule called A and B days in school. And so on A days, I would wear a blazer to class in the 6th grade, and I would take on my classmates as clients, and they would pay me 25 cents to go and argue on half of them to a teacher about something. And then on B days, I would be a doctor. And so if you weren't feeling well, you could come to me and give me 25 cents. And I would tell you to go to the nurse's office because I wasn't really a doctor. And I think it's so funny where I did not end up becoming a medical doctor. I am not an attorney as of today. And I decided to, when I got to college, I was actually a pre-med biochem major. And within 3 weeks of school, without even having a science class, I said, I don't think I actually want to go to medical school. And so I opted to go to business school instead. And so my bachelor's degree is in business finance. And the second semester of my senior year of college, right before graduation, I decided that I did not want to work in corporate finance. I like the idea of being able to advise people on how to generate wealth for themselves and their families. But I did not want to have a career in it. And so I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do after undergrad, but I knew that my degree in business was pretty versatile. And so that was a safe way for me to be able to maneuver. I actually got my start in HR when I was working at the university in the Center for Career Development. And I was helping students with their resumes. I was running a closed closet if they needed to interview for an internship, organizing the career fairs. And I was recruited by one of the employers on campus to join their corporate team. And so I left education and went into the corporate space at a healthcare company, and started off doing some things around employee relations, did some HR administrative operational tasks, and then I had an opportunity to jump into talent acquisition. And this is where I discovered my life's purpose for this work. I was making an offer to a candidate, one of my very first offers. And I remember this person crying on the phone with me because this was an opportunity that was changing their life and the life for their children. It provided more income, more stability, a better environment. And I cried on the phone with that person because I was able to be this conduit, this connector of getting someone to what they needed to be able to thrive in their space. And so literally, from that moment forward, I knew that whatever capacity of the work I was doing, it was to be a connector of people, a connector of resources, and a connector of opportunity. And so no matter the roles I've been in, that is the basis. How am I connecting people who need to be served and supported to the things that can be life-changing for them? And so got my introduction into HR there. And then I was introduced really into diversity, equity, inclusion in that same facet, where I noticed that internally we had populations of people and people of color specifically that were being overlooked for different roles because managers already had in mind who they wanted, and it looked like what they call a good old boy system. And so I knew early on that everyone did not have the same experience. And for me, that was very important to make sure that whatever systems and solutions are being deployed, that at the systemic level, that they are not creating disparities for other communities, and especially communities of color. And so that is my introduction into this work. I've been in the HR space now for about 10 years. The last 5 years, I will say, have been in a DEI dedicated focus role with a title. And it has been life-changing. I've learned so much and know that I have a lot more to learn in this space.
Wow, yeah, that is a very, very powerful actually start, trying to get from being medical student or, in medical or being an attorney to find yourself in HR in a way. So that's really powerful. And actually having this opportunity to having that first experience, which actually determined the rest of your career now, where you really understood the power. It's not really the power, the privilege of giving somebody a chance in life to just get the job they deserve, actually. That is really, really amazing, because I know that even here in the UK and in Europe, there are still quite a lot of people who are undervalued or who don't get the access that they need to, because, they just don't get that chance. So having some people like you actually offer those chances really like God sent to everybody. So and have you been since then very much focusing on now, when you really became very clear that you wanted to really keep your focus on creating this access to opportunity? So tell me that moment. What does that look like? Was it an aha moment when one day you just stop and say, well, this is my path, this is what I'm born to do? Or it just happened a little bit gradually? Tell me that story.
I want to say that it was gradually, but there have been some very significant moments in my career and things that have happened to me personally as well, that I think where they were indicators that I should have honed in earlier on, but finally the light bulb clicked. And one of the things that comes to mind specifically for me is when a couple years ago now, I was working with a leader. I was reporting into a VP, and it was time for performance reviews. And I don't know about anyone else, but I despise performance reviews. I don't like having to write them when you have employees.
I thought it was only me.
No, it's me too. You don't want to write the performance review. It's a lot, right? Because you have to go through different files that have been misplaced everywhere to try to pull it together and write this summary of what you think sounds good. And you want to write it well enough to where the employee isn't disgruntled. You want to write yours well enough to where if you want to get a promotion, you can advocate for that. So I think I was going through the review process for this company, and my manager at the time, the vice president, she put into my performance review that I was defensive and aggressive. And that verbiage came out of an interaction where I had to correct her on the language that she was using and how harmful it was to people of marginalized communities, especially for Black women in the workplace. She was a white female, and so it was not received very well, and it was added to my performance review. The issue of that is not just it was added into my performance review, but your performance reviews are actually linked to total rewards programs at companies, meaning how much does your pay increase over time? Will you be able to get a promotion in the future? How will other hiring managers in the company view you? And so it had a long-lasting systemic effect in that process, and I challenged it. We went through a couple of processes external of the organization, and while it did not end in my favor, I realized that no one else should have to go through an experience like that. And I think at that particular moment, that is when I began to take the role of being a mentor very seriously to other people, but especially other Black women who were my mentees. And I had an opportunity actually quite recently when I had 2 mentees at an organization that were issued a performance improvement plan. And I'm going somewhere with this. I promise. And I'm going to this.
Yeah.
Issue performance improvement plans, or what people call PIPs. And when I looked at their PIPs, there was no way that a member of the HR team had signed off on those. It couldn't have been, because as someone who has worked in employee relations before, I know exactly what to look for. And there were just a lot of flags, and the details, it was very subjective. It was based on personality. And I think the caveat here to consider is that the hiring manager was a white woman, and my two mentees were women of color. And they were the only two that were placed on PIPs out of their entire team. And so I got with my mentees, I helped them to challenge those PIPs line by line. And, you know, they ended up being terminated as part of a reduction in force for the company. That was an easy way out. But I said at that very moment that going forward, I would not be the person that stands by and allows people not to know how to advocate for themselves. And so I decided to build a solution that aims and is about empowering employees to advocate for themselves. And many times we just don't know what we don't know until someone tells us. And so I'm allowing myself to be the person that tells them in partnership with other employment attorneys across the US. So anyhow, that is how I think I've gotten to the point of knowing that employee advocacy is the drive behind everything that I do, behind every product that is built, is how do we create an equitable experience and a space for accountability on both sides.
Yeah, that is really, really powerful because and then I can see also the nuance, and I think that I had a discussion also with another American last time who actually it is different in Europe. Employer advocacy is much more a little bit equivalent to employee ambassador, like employees that actually are becoming brand ambassador for their companies. But I can see that in US, employee advocacy, perhaps some places in Europe as well, but so far haven't been looking into that bit, is how you can defend yourself, how you can actually as you say, know what to look for in anywhere, even proactively, and advocating for yourself as well. So which is very interesting, actually. Sometimes the differences that are in one word, which is employee advocacy, but it means something else in US or in other places, another thing in Europe. But it's very, very important. And I think that even when employees becoming ambassador, they obviously need to understand also how to advocate for themselves, and this is not something that has been ever taught anywhere, not in school, I don't think so, and definitely not in organization. So where do people need to go, actually? If I just stay a little bit with your definition of employee advocacy, because I just wanted to explore that bit. How do you get to empower so many people at so many scale, at a bigger scale, of how to advocate for themselves? How on earth do they do that?
Yeah, I think what's being explored right now for Culture Site, and again, a Culture Site is this platform that gives people in the US the step-by-step guidelines on information that they should be tracking about their workplace experiences. But in addition to them having this tool to be able to track their experiences and collect evidence, it's also providing blogs about, best practices. Also, I'm very vocal on LinkedIn. I'll try to share best practices there with people. And back in my recruiter days, Francine, I'll say this, I am embarrassingly in over 100 groups on LinkedIn and in Facebook when I was a recruiter, and I'm still pretty active in those groups. And what I'll do is, sadly, there's not a day that goes by where I'm in these groups and at least one person is talking about how they've experienced discrimination or retaliation or harassment, or they're having performance challenges with their manager or their peers. And I think for me, being able to connect directly with those people, share the tool out in real time, have them to share it with people that they know need it, has been really important in being able to get the tool and the information into the hands of people I'm also partnered with several different employment attorneys who I consider to be legal advisors for Culture Site. And we're now getting into the space of doing webinars to be able to invite people out to get this information so that they can start to leverage and use it. How do we scale this on a larger platform? We have the product. I think tech will be the accelerator to get it into the hands of people, but it's getting the exposure, it's continuing to share the story, to share the message, to loop people in, to have those one-off conversations with people who are having a hard time, and to share the tool for them as a resource.
Wow. I hope that that will be applicable in Europe too. That is something that I'm going to have a look at, if I'm sure that there's no reason why it shouldn't be the case, giving this power to people. I love that thing. The power to people to advocate for themselves, really, and challenging and looking at what actually, because those performance reviews sometimes, there's nothing you can do. Myself, I have been on the receiving end of many of those as well. I was in corporate before, started my own company and working for big multinationals. And you can have some managers just writing stuff you don't agree. I remember that some of them, it was a discussion during the performance review. They will say something, I say, no, I don't agree with that. Even my MD sometimes, I don't agree with what he was saying. So so it's very, very important. I didn't even know that such resources existed. You just opened my eyes to that now. So I'll definitely have a look into.
And what's unique about Culture Site though is that it could go to different countries, but it would need to be tailored to the employment guidelines of that company. So right now, Culture Site is based on the federal EEOC guidelines in the US. We would need to really understand, for the countries and nuances within Europe. I think people get this misconception that Europe is just England. And I'm like, no, you have
of course not. You have France, which is a big one in terms of employment, employment law. You don't want to mess up with France.
So I think if there's a market, or if there's an appetite for having a similar tool in any kind of Middle Eastern or European country, then I think it makes sense to explore what does employment law look like there, and what are the challenges that employees face the most, and then being able to tailor a tool that supports them to get through that process, to be able to advocate for themselves.
Wow, I think that you definitely need to find some partners to look into this thing in all those different countries. Wow. I don't know. Actually, I've never heard about this. Perhaps some exist, but let have a look into it. So yes, staying in the DNI on DNI topic before we get into what actually is the focus of the podcast for this season, is that I've seen one of your LinkedIn posts where you say that too many organizations are implementing diversity hiring goals without doing the necessary internal work. And I was saying, okay, what is that necessary work they need to do actually? Do they know?
I think that a lot of companies have taken the initiative to hire people on their teams to lead diversity, equity, and inclusion. One thing that I have also noticed organizations are doing is that they are hiring people who have not done equity-based work, who are not familiar with people systems or HR systems, who do not understand how supplier and vendor diversity works, as well, or product diversity and accessibility. And so I think part of that necessary internal work that has to be done before bringing in more groups of historically excluded people into a space, it starts with the experience that people already have. So for example, if we have a goal to have 50% gender representation, we have to ask ourselves, and the companies that we support, do we have the systems and the benefits and the structure in place for them to be successful? That means, have we done our due diligence in creating what a culture code looks like? What's acceptable, what's not acceptable behavior from others in the organization? Do we have the resources available to propel their development and their learning and their continued education? Do we have a way to capture feedback? when we think about internal promotions, do we have clear criteria on what success looks like? And what does it not look like, and how it should be evaluated for a consistent and fair review? Those are the things that come to mind to me that a lot of companies tend to skip and put the cart before the horse, for lack of better words, and they'll go out and hire a bunch of people, but it becomes this revolving door where they only stay for 1 to 2 years, maybe because of the experience that they're having at the organization. They're experiencing acts of exclusion that they don't want to try to survive in. Right. And so that's what I'm saying about the necessary work. It's the culture work. And your culture is not just the words that you throw around to people to make them feel included. It's also about the systems that you have in your organization, and even the unspoken code of conduct that is there.
Yeah, I love that, they have to think of all of those things. However, what if, we know how cultural change really takes time to change, a culture. Do they have to get all these things in order before hiring, diverse people? How can they do that in maybe in an agile way? I'm sure that, if you tell them that, hey, you need to look at your system, you need to look at your process, you need to look at your vendors, this never happen, especially for those big organizations that I know. It will not happen today. It will take 5 years. So that means that during those 5 years, they shouldn't try to bring some people in, or if they bring them in, how can they manage that actually?
Yeah, so it definitely needs to be an agile process and a way of thinking. I think it usually starts with an internal audit, an assessment of the current state of the organization. So you go through every facet, you get a good read of what that looks like. For an experienced practitioner, that takes them somewhere from between 3 to 6 months to be able to collect and gather and analyze that information, to then be able to formulate a strategy on doing that. And so you can do it. It needs to be in a phased approach, to give you just a very direct answer to the question. You can bring people in, but you need to be able to clearly identify and address what are the main things that need to be addressed, what needs to be prioritized that you can get done in the first 3 to 6 months to solve for that challenge. And then what are the immediate resources that you can use to put in place until you have the long-term solutions ready to go and to deploy. So you have the short-term solutions, and then you have the long-term. It has to work together in tandem. What usually happens is that companies will say, I'm ready to bring on these groups of people, but they're not ready to make the investment in the short-term resources to support that population while they're on the longer journey. You want the immediate return on investment, not realizing that sometimes, to your point, to fix a system, it may take you 2 years to do that. But what do you have in the interim, and what are you willing to give in the interim while this is being developed for a long-term sustainable solution?
Yeah, it's really having that audit, as you say, and having the awareness of where we are and where we are going, and then how, what's the milestone, how they look like. And okay, we know that we have to fix this and that, but even if we bring this population in now, we know that, okay, it may not be perfect, but we are working on that, and we have a way of measuring our progress actually. Because a lot of people, after George Floyd's murder, I was part also of a training cohort that actually did train people on race fluency here in the UK, and for big Fortune 500 companies. But some of them have these kind of targets, but yeah, you are not sure what actually they are doing in terms of the system that they are putting in place to really track these big, goal that they say they want to hit by whatever time actually. So, and, which actually just bring me to this FT article that I read on LinkedIn actually about the exit of a lot of diversity executives. I don't know if you have seen that happening. And if those diversity executives are leaving, so who is going to do the job? Or were they the wrong people? I don't know what's going on, why there are a lot of executive exiting in diversity and inclusion realm, actually? Any clue of what's going
Yeah.
on?
Yeah. And I think this is also not something I would say that is unique to chief diversity officers. This is also true to anyone or any position within the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. And the main reason that this particular role or a position in this space of work has higher turnover is due to lack of support. And lack of support can mean lack of vocal support, lack of financial support to drive certain initiatives, and also lack of accountability. One of the things that I have learned in doing this work is that even if you have the resources and even if you have the vocal support, if you lack the accountability from leadership and the actual power to hold people accountable, nothing will change. And it can be very exhausting. I think that most people will give themselves a year and a half to really assess a current situation to see, can they actually make progress in this space, or are they fighting a losing battle? And once you've seen that you're fighting a losing battle, because it is a choice, right? Whether if you either you want to do it or you don't, then you'll start to see people go elsewhere. And it becomes this cycle. This is also, in tandem with the fact that during the interview process, some companies will sell you hopes and dreams, right? They'll tell you one thing in the interview process, and then in comes the horse, right? In disguise, the Trojan horse, where you assume that it was going to be this thing, and now that we've got you and you're in here, here's the truth, and here's how we're really operating. Go make it look good externally.
Yeah, so I think that the lack of accountability thing is a huge, because as you say, if you have the resource, you can be vocal, but nobody feel like whatever they are doing, all the microaggressions and everything else that they are doing, nobody is saying anything. So, or it's not even reflected in any kind of performance review of them, even, because that should be also tracked in the performance review and all those things. But if nothing of such is happening, so people are still doing what they used to do, actually. And people who just got in are going to be so frustrated they're going to leave again. So, and then it's like you haven't done anything. So yes. So what would you say, now if we get into really the proper employee advocacy, but in terms of employee ambassador, the way I'm looking at or defining for this season, what I'm calling employee advocacy is how actually employees are in their organization very well looked after. They have a great culture. They have everything that they love in the company, and they are willing to become the brand ambassador of their companies. So for such thing to happen, what would you say will be the prerequisite of a company for anybody or employees in your diverse experience that you have? What would you see, what have you seen that will make people that are working in their company to become the brand ambassador of their company?
I think that even though employees can join an organization that doesn't have it all together, because no company just has it all together, I think the one deciding factor that can really speak more volumes and that employees will be willing to talk about is if they have a good manager. And a good manager can be defined in multiple ways, depending on the person that's speaking and depending on what your personal preference is as an employee. But if you are able to have a leader that empowers you, that supports you, that develops you in a way that is unique for you, then it does not matter to a large extent of what else is happening in the organization, because where you spend most of your time at will be with your team and with your manager. And if you have a strong manager or a strong team leader, your experience will very differently from anyone in the organization that does not have a good manager. And so if organizations prioritize having good managers lead their teams and their people, that's a good way to get an
Yeah.
employee to advocate for the organization. And each team has its own culture. But if you have a manager, if there's a standard that's been set for what does a good manager look like for this company, then I think that's a sure way to see some of that success. And instead of having employees talk about, well, you know, my manager I experience microaggressions or biases at work, then you have someone that's talking about my manager is so supportive, X and Y. Great. What company are you at? Oh, I'm at this company.
Yeah.
Right. So you get the natural, you get the natural advocacy from that. And so employee advocacy can go both ways. It can harm you, or it can help you depending on the truth that's happening in your organization.
Yeah, you are so right, actually, that actually is not, yes, because the company is so big that, you know, people don't come in the company like that, you know, in the voice, they come to a manager. And if the manager actually, they even say that people don't leave company, they leave managers, actually. I think that there is a saying say that, and which is so true, because if your manager is not supportive or is the one actually, in most cases that I'm hearing now, is about managers, actually. The whole thing is about managers. How can we, or can organization that actually really support those managers to be one self-aware that it's them who actually need to foster that, you know, culture, or within their team, this you know, way of, you know, helping their employee to develop. Because I think that there is a lack there. I don't know how it's going on your side, but what can company do to develop most managers? I know that during COVID also, like working online and all those things have added another layer to the whole manager you know, development. Yes. Can you tell something about that, actually, how to develop managers?
Yeah, I think one of the things that companies can really do is to invest again in manager capability building. And it has been, in my experience, that sometimes managers will get a manager position, not because they are a good people leader and they have strong qualities, but it's because they have been very strong individual contributors in that space. And
that's the Peterization, right?
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
being a strong individual contributor in a particular area does not necessarily mean that you'll be a great manager of a team and of that person. It takes development over time. It takes practice and support and learning how to build genuine and authentic relationships with people. It's learning how to flex your natural or your more dominant leadership style to support the people on your team who may need something different. It's, you know, when I think about development and performance in general, managers spend about 210 hours a year on performance management activities and processes. And what that means is that they're having one-on-one meetings with their teams, they're having team calls, they're thinking about ways to develop and promote and provide experiences and opportunities for their team and making decisions with and for their team. And I don't know, I actually can't think of an organization at this moment that does this very well. And it's really important that companies have strong talent management and development programs for that reason, to be able to get training to the managers, those who lead people in the organization, just as it's equally important to make sure that you have technology and tools that facilitate that learning and facilitate that process. So those are just my initial thoughts around, you know,
and also, I think there is a trend at the moment. I'm not sure how widespread is the trend, is to just remove all managers and have this flat organization where no managers. There was this guy, actually, I was listening to his podcast last time, Josh Burson or something, who was talking about that. He wrote a book called Irresistible or something. And he was talking about today's concept and, you know, citing some companies who are just getting rid of the managers and, you know, and having a flat organization where things are running very well. And I think there have been quite a few companies that here in UK also that have done that. So, and it looked like it's working well. So, because it looked like sometimes managers can be, you know, getting in the way of some people sometimes advancing faster. Not all the time, but perhaps in some ways, especially now with the technology, with AI and all those things. So people are questioning, what's the role of a manager? What's the role of a manager, actually? So I think that we definitely are in a moment in time. I think that we just kind of inherited all these things from the Industrial Revolution, and nothing has really changed. And now we are just faced with this new world. I think new world that we need to create. I think that everything can be created from now. Do you have any idea of what need to be created to get those organizations work? Because it looked like not many people want to go to work now, like 5 days a week in their offices. Definitely not. So, but in terms of management as well. So, any thoughts that you've been pondering? How can that work?
Yeah, I don't know if a flat organization is the answer for companies that are a bit more larger in size and that may have a global reach. I think it depends on where the company is in their maturity journal and the nature of the work and the industry and the business. What I think could be helpful in helping to facilitate more meaningful interactions and getting people more engaged in work is the flexibility, right? So we've gone from, at least in the US, we've gone from this 40-hour work week, this traditional come into the office 5 days a week, to where COVID has shown us that this could have been our reality for quite some time. And now it has a chance and momentum to accelerate because it's being fueled by technology that enables us to work from anywhere in the world, to be able to have the autonomy over the work that we know needs to be done that's connected back to the goals of the organization. I think that the moment that we start to embrace what this new way of work is, the better off we'll be, the better that we can attract top talent into organizations. And we also need to evolve our ways of work in those organizations and to take a step back from what has been the status quo and really assess what's needed to progress forward. And that's going to be different depending on the organization.
Yeah, we are actually at a moment where, it can no longer be like a set of rules that apply to all organizations like in the past, but much more personalization, I think, and which is what technology is enabling us to do actually now. So can you actually, I know that, you say that there's no perfect companies out there, but can you give us perhaps some example of some company who actually really have this culture where at least, their employees really are happy to come to work? I know that is also greatly part because of the managers. But in terms of the organizations that you've seen that are working well, or, when most of the time the employees really love to work, are there some characteristics of those companies that actually do get it right at the moment? Have you seen some kind of patterns of what will be the underlying factors in there?
I think it's very nuanced, and I can only answer this question based on the organizations that I've worked in, because I believe that the truth will vary depending on the person that's talking and depending on where they are in the wheel of privilege when they show up into a workspace. I can't say that any of my previous companies that I've been at have personally done this well. It doesn't mean that they haven't done some things right. I can't just say that it has been done well based on my personal experiences. I think the characteristics of an organization that is building a strong culture, that is becoming more agile, that is adapting to its people, is one that offers inclusive benefits, one that offers flexibility and autonomy, that invests in its people. It's people-centric. It has processes that are equitable and that are applied consistently across the board to all groups of people. that gives you the space to grow and to maneuver and to find a space where in the organization you feel like you can show up and be yourself and do good work. And that experience is largely impacted by the manager that someone has. It's also impacted by the systems that the companies have in them. And so, again, the answer will vary depending on the person that you're talking to.
Okay, so in this, just to end up this this part of our conversation, what would you say will be some of your top advice for perhaps some leaders who are still looking to do something better in their organization and start this journey where people will love, to come to work? And do you have any advice, any tips for those organizations who are still trying to find a way of doing it?
Yeah, I think a first step for managers and organizations that are wanting to invest in their managers to navigate or gravitate towards building a more inclusive workplace and having a better culture is to invest in education and training and support and resources around what does it mean to be an inclusive leader. I think that's a good start. Is how to interact with people, how to understand yourself while you're interacting with people, and how to cultivate a space that gives people the option to show up in a way that's comfortable for them.
I love that. I love that. Exactly. Sounds like a very, very good place to start. It definitely, get your managers to become more fluent in becoming inclusive leaders and empowering their team. Wonderful. Now let's look at the last part of our conversation, which is about the 3M. This podcast is Meaningful Work, Meaningful Life podcast, where actually I'll always love to end the conversation with those 3M: meaning, money, and movement. So the meaning side is, where do you get your inspiration from and what gives you meaning?
Yeah, I think my inspiration comes from seeing an opportunity to serve a need that has gone unmet for quite some time. It comes from the people's experiences that I know personally and them sharing that information with me. What gives my life meaning? Again, my purpose here is to be a connector. I am here to be a connector and a conduit that provides a resource to someone else, a benefit to someone else. I'm always going into a conversation, or I'm always interacting with someone, not as in what can they do for me, but how can I add value to that person's life? And with no expectation of anything else in return. That is how I approach any relationship with anyone and with any organization, is how can I add value to them?
That's awesome. That's really, really awesome and very inspiring as well. So now the money side, I'm very generous and I give you £1 billion. So that means $1.3 billion. What would you do with that? And how would you spend your days?
Oh my goodness. So that's a very easy question. I think about winning the lottery and the lottery. I would spend that money investing back into underserved, historically excluded, underestimated, underprivileged communities. That is what I would do. It would be creating organizations that give people the skills and what they need to be successful. It's investing in other entrepreneurs to rebuild in their communities to start to close wealth gaps. It would be investing in other people and going to the Bahamas. So.
Okay, that's wonderful. That really shows a big alignment. It's not just going to just live underneath a coconut tree and then stay there for the rest of your life. That's good. So, and how do you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered as the person that helped to open a door that changed their life the moment they stepped through it. That is how I want to leave this earth.
Oh, let people remember you as someone who opens the door. That is so, so, so wonderful. So how now people can reach you and learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, I am not hard to find. You can find me on LinkedIn at Kristin Bell. You can also connect with me through my websites, which is culturesite.com or reviewtaylor.com. I also have a Facebook that I am on every now and then. I have an Instagram that I'm on once a month, but the main way to reach out to me is through LinkedIn. I
LinkedIn.
respond to
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you so much, Kristin. The time has just gone like this. Thank you so much for joining me today in the Meaningful Work, Meaningful Life podcast and really sharing this brilliant, valuable insight. I really appreciate you. And it was such a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can do anything else for you, if I can be a connector for you in any way to anybody in my network, do not hesitate to reach out.
Oh, that is so nice. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And let's keep in touch, definitely.